Hi guys, my name is Travis Long and I will be doing my lesson 2 review for this week. This week we talked a lot about cultural identity, cultural diversity, and interpreting in those communities. So the first thing I want to talk about is Jackson's identity video. She discussed a lot of what is covered in chapter 2, mostly being about what is culture itself, um, uh, collectivists versus individualists, and yeah, that kind of covers it. And culture identity is, of course. And then she ended with some information about interpreting specifically, but that doesn't kind of flow with our lessons this week. So she defined culture as culture includes knowledge, the beliefs, the art, laws, customs, etc. Of a specific community. And it usually involves a set of social norms or values, being either materialistic, like clothes or food, behavioral things such as saying excuse me when you are trying to pass by someone, or um, not picking your nose in public. Cognitive things would be the third thing, and that would be like shaking someone's hand when you're introduced to them. These are the things that you learn about as you're growing up to be social norms. Um, and then let's see, collectivists versus individualists. So collectivists would be, this is 70% of the world. This is most of everyone who is here. They value that interdependence and value that support system, and usually play a lot of like team type activities, and have a common shared history with their group or community or culture. Individualist is someone who values independence, who desires recognition for all of their accomplishments, someone who has normally shorter relationships, whether that be like in school or in different groups. Specifically, she talked about like having a group of friends in elementary school and then having a different group of friends in high school and then having a different group of friends in college. So you have shorter relationships. And then chapter 2 ends by giving a couple different examples of the different like scenarios that it could be in. For example, there was one that talked about Masato, who was a Japanese man who interpreted for Japanese between Japanese and English, and then he married an American woman named Mary, who was an ASL to English interpreter, and that whenever they came together, they saw how much cultural differences they had between each other. And so that was just one thing that they did in chapter 2. Chapter 3, working in multicultural communities, is just basically looking at interpreting in different ways with different cultural groups. So they took a interpreter, compared to how that would correlate with American deaf people, like the general population of deaf people, African American deaf people, Hispanic and Native American deaf people, and in different categories such as like their family and community, the language, time and status. So there was a couple different things that they looked at with that. Um, and then they also talked about um, attention getting and signal devices. So like alarm clocks that flash, or vibrating alarm clocks, um, or like using your hand to wave to get someone's attention. So visual things that deaf people use to substitute for the hearing things that the hearing people use. So that's kind of the gist of chapter 3. And then chapter 4, we talked about identifying communication in the deaf community. So this is talking a lot about identity and labeling. So identity is how you want others to perceive yourself. And then also we discussed the hearing view versus the deaf view of the deaf themselves. So the deaf's view of the deaf is, with a big D deaf, you are proud of your community, you are involved in deaf events, you are proud to use ASL, and love who you are as a deaf person. With the small d deaf community, I'm not sure if we actually talked about small d deaf, but I'll go over it real quick. That is just someone who has hearing loss, doesn't pride themselves in the deaf community. They may oralize or use oral communication or lip read, things like that. And then the hearing view would be that deaf people are just, the general hearing view is that deaf people are just someone who can't hear or has hearing loss. And then it discusses a couple different things about like foreign sign languages, such as international sign language, Spanish sign language, Japanese sign language, things like that. Home signs, which are things that the deaf community uses within their own homes. With people who you're closely connected with, you may have some of your own made up signs. Oral deaf who lip read and vocalize for themselves, and then deaf blind who use tactile sign language. And then the last thing that we had to do for this week's lessons was watch a video about Anna Witter Merrithew. She discussed her experiences in a different version of the deaf community, and that her family was Mennonite, and she grew up in a farm community that was very small. Her father was deaf and her mother was not, and she just talks about her experiences and then how how that interpreting is a very valued position. Sorry, trying not to run off too fast, but she talked about equal-mindedness, fair-mindedness, invisibility paradigm. She talked about a lot, but I'm going to cut my video off now since we're at 7 minutes. So yeah, so that's the gist of what we talked about this week. Thanks.